than it would be to apologize for quality forever. Now, I'll bet you're glad we made that decision, aren't you? I'm telling you, folks, I've sold a lot of merchandise with that particular close. It really does work. Let me emphasize a point. People do make emotional decisions. For example, we griped and complained when they started making us wear our seat belts in automobiles. I've never heard anybody gripe about wearing a seat belt in an airplane. And yet the truth is, if you have a wreck in a car with your seatbelt on, the odds are 3 to 1 that is going to prevent more serious injury, perhaps even save your life. Now, on an airplane, 30,000 feet up, you got your seatbelt fastened, and that sucker comes down. I'm here to tell you that seatbelt's not going to do you any good at all. We do make emotional decisions. Now, again, if we can put emotional and logic together, we're going to be in business. Eb Jackson from Tucson, Arizona, is in the life insurance business, and he was telling me he used this very specific close to make the biggest sale of his career. And incidentally, he said he was kind of dragging bottom at that particular point. He called on this couple and made the presentation on the biggest contract he had ever offered. And the objection they brought up was simply the price is too high. And then Ab simply looked at them and lowered his voice and said, many, many years ago, our company made a very basic decision. They decided it would be easier to explain price one time than it would be to apologize for poor service for the rest of your life. I'm glad they made that decision, Mr. Prospect, and I'll bet you are too. Ab said it worked beautifully. Now, I'd like for you to please understand this. Every close won't work for everybody selling everything. Your experience, your judgment, and your common sense will be the determining factors. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, Ziegler, why do we need to know so many closes anyhow? Well, let me give you a basic reason for that. Dr. Herb True did some research at Notre Dame University. He discovered that only 4% of all of the salespeople in America will ask for the order 5 or more times. Now, I want to emphasize something. They do not necessarily ask those 5 times in the same interview. There are many presentations where, in fact, you do not ask for the order simply because you're gaining information so that you can make a legitimate proposal to them. When you're talking thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars, you don't walk in, make a presentation very many times, and walk out with a multi-million-dollar contract, though it does happen, especially if you expect it to happen. But what Dr. True discovered was simply this. Those who ask for the order over a period of time, sometimes in one sitting, more often in 2 or 3 sittings, at least 5 times, those 4% closed over 60% of all of the sales, meaning simply that they made over 60% of all of the income. You got to ask for the order. When I first got started in selling, one of the first things I was told was you close early, you close often, and you close late. How many of you have ever been told that, especially when you first got started in selling? Yeah. Well, the question comes up, how early is early? Let me emphasize this as strongly as I can emphasize it. You never ask for the order until you have given them some legitimate, logical reason for giving you a yes answer. If you've not given them value before you ask for the order, you come across as a high-pressure type salesperson. I want to get this over and move on to the next prospect. Now, that's one of the reasons you give that value first. Because once the prospect has said no, a little barrier goes up. You can get over it, but it is more difficult than if the barrier had never been raised. So give value before you ask for the order. And that leads us into what I call is that fair enough close. You do build that value before you ask for the decision. But let me simply say this. It's okay. It's even wise to let the prospect know in advance, maybe, that you're going to ask for the order. For example, years ago, things were slightly different than what they are today. When I was in the life insurance business, we used to do the fact-finding interview, and then we would go back with a proposal. And I would always have it in a beautiful folder. And when I went back, then I would take the proposal like so, and I would say, I have prepared a proposal for you. Then I would pull out a plain sheet of paper like so. And this is where I'm saying it's okay, it's even wise, particularly if you can go ahead and if you've done a lot of research before you get there and let them know in advance you're going to ask for the order. So I'd pull out this sheet of paper and I'd say, now, Mr. and Miss Prospect, as you can see, I got a plain sheet of paper. There's obviously nothing there to explain. There's nothing there that you would not understand because there's nothing there. Here's a promise I'm going to make you. I'm going to promise you that when I finish this proposal to you, that it's going to be just as clear, just as plain as that blank sheet of paper is at this moment. And if it is that clear, and if it is that plain, then I'm going to ask you, if you see it is in your best interest to go ahead, I'm going to ask you this evening or this morning or whatever to make that decision. Is that fair enough? I'd like to inject a little extra right here. I would like to inject a clause I call simply the "you've got an answer for everything" clause. Now, here's what I mean. Sometimes you've answered several objections, and you've impressed the prospect with just how much you know about what you're talking about. And so many times, half in admiration and half in exasperation, the prospect will look at you and say, well, it doesn't make a difference what I say. You've got an answer for everything. How many of you have ever had somebody say that to you? All right? You're that close to making the sale, but you're that close to missing it. If you modestly admit that you were number one in the region last month, you just blew it. If a prospect says that, regardless of whether it's in admiration or exasperation, you quietly look them in the eye and you say to them, well, I really appreciate that comment. I'm going to take it as a compliment. But the truth is, there are many things I do not have the answer for. That's one of the reasons that I'm so excited about selling a product or service, which is the answer to your problem. And that's what you really want, isn't it? You convert it, you've now made it a very positive close. A number of years ago, I was traveling through St. Louis, Missouri. I was changing planes, had a little extra time, looked down at my shoes, realized I needed a shoe shine. Walked into the shine stand. Young man escorted me to my seat. He made the change for his previous customer. I had a chance to look at the prices of the shoe shine. 75 cents, this was about 12 years ago. 75 cents was the regular shine, $1 was the wax shine, and $2 was the spit shine. Well, I figured I'd get the regular shine for 75 cents, tip the guy a quarter, and I'd be on my way. He came to me, and incidentally, I called this the shame close. He came to me, and then he said, which one? I said, regular. Now, you're talking about voice inflection. The young man backed up and said, regular. Well, I knew right then I was in for an unusual shoe shine, but I wasn't about to let that guy get the best of me, so I said, yeah, you guys do such a marvelous job here. I know it's going to be fabulous, and I'll be on my way. Well, the guy didn't say a thing, didn't even grunt. He just started putting the saddle soap on my shoes, and he started cleaning them. And as he did, he said, man, these are really nice shoes. He said, what kind are they? And I said, well, they're ballast. He said, boy, he said, they're nice. He said, I bet they're comfortable, aren't they? I said, they ought to be. He said, cost a lot of money. I said, do they ever cost a lot of money? And he went on cleaning the shoes, you know. And then he reached up and he felt the pant leg. And he said, man, he said, that is really a nice piece of cloth. And I said, well, it ought to be too. He said, what kind is it? And I said, well, it's a Hickey Freeman. He said, man, those suckers cost a lot of money. I said, yeah, I know they do, but this one's got some special cloth in it, makes it even more expensive. But I've already been wearing this suit about 5 years, and you still can't see any problem with it. Well, he said, man, he said, that's nice. And then he started the shining process, and he was just a shining away, and he was a popping, you know, and when they're popping, that's not shining. I shine shoes in the Navy. I know when you're shining shoes. That's a sales talk. He's trying to attract the crowd from outside. So he was just a popping away, and all of a sudden he backed away, and he looked me right in the eye, and he said, you know, this seemed like a shame. Man spent over $100 on a pair of shoes. Spend several $100s to get a nice suit of clothes. And all he's trying to do is look nice. Then he won't spend another $1 to get the best shine in the whole world. I said, spit on him, man. Spit on him. Well, now, folks, you know, when you get a 75-cent shine, a 2-bit tip, that's fine. But when you got a $2 shine, nobody with class gives a 2-bit tip. So I gave him a $3, you know, and as I walked out, you know, I was really picking them up and putting them down. I was feeling pretty good, you know. I looked up at the clock, and I said, it clicked straight up and down 10 o'clock. Now, the reason I mentioned that is because when I sat down, I noticed it was exactly 3 minutes until 10. I was in his chair 3 minutes. I gave him $3. Now, you don't have to be a Phi Beta Kappa from MIT to figure that one out. That is $60 an hour. Did you realize that's what we were paying our psychiatrists back then? Of course, this guy does some good. But, you know, you might say, but Zig, he doesn't shine 20 pair of shoes an hour all day long. Okay, but you figure, let's cut that half in two. Instead of 60, he makes 30. Cut that half in two. He doesn't make 30, he makes 15. And you take $15 an hour and cut that half in two, and I know he does more. You know what that adds up to? It adds up to right at $20,000 a year, shining shoes. And I got something to tell you, friends. If that dude ain't making at least 30, ain't a dog in Georgia. I mean, he is shining a lot of shoes. But now let me point out two very sound things about him. His name is Johnny. I asked him his last name. I knew Johnny because it had his name on his name tag there. He said, I'm not going to tell you. If I tell you both names, you'll forget them both. If you'll always remember Johnny, though. He was a professional. He's the only shoeologist I've ever seen. Now, the reason I know he was a shoeologist, he had it right there on his name tag. Johnny, shoeologist. But let me point out a couple of things. He was a superb workman. He delivered everything he sold. That's important. Number two, he was a professional salesperson, and those two things merit it. But what I'm really saying is, if a gentleman in a job like that can make that kind of money, look at what we in the profession who have products and goods and services that extend to us infinitely greater opportunities, look what we can do. But the story doesn't end there. A few months later, I was back in the St. Louis airport. I walked in this time. There's no other shine guy around, no other customer. I'm the only one. Now, by then, they've changed their prices and structure just a little bit. It simply says, best shine, $2. I sat down, and he said, what kind? Well, I didn't want to go through that routine again. So I said, just give me your best. Well, as he was shining, I was bragging on him. You know, I discovered a long time ago that behavior which is recognized and rewarded is repeated. And so I wanted the best possible shine. So we had quite a little conversation. As a matter of fact, he got carried away and he just kept shining, kept shining, kept shining. And finally I said, Johnny, I got to go. He said, okay, and he finished it up. As I stepped down, he said, you know, he said, I noticed you hung up an overnight bag when you sat down. I said, yeah. He said, you spent the night in St. Louis? I said, yeah. He said, I was just wondering if you had another pair of shoes in your bag. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I do. He said, you know, it'd really be a shame to have the best looking shine in St. Louis tonight and then just look like one of the gang tomorrow. He said, won't take me but a moment. I call that the extra clothes. Now, a lot of times as salespeople, we overlook the fact that we have other goods and products and services. We skim the surface, and leave more money on the table, more needs on the table that need to be met than we are actually reaching. Don't misunderstand. I'm not suggesting you try to sell everybody everything you've got every time you make that call on them. But they're buying, if you're selling products that you know they're buying from someone else, think of the time and effort you can save them if you can become more of a service person to them, selling them more of the things they're buying already anyhow. It is a service. You really can't have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. Then I'd like to share with you what I call the marriage close. I was in the insurance business. One of the things that used to frustrate me, I'd spend a lot of time preparing a proposal and making the presentation. Get down to the close, and the prospect would say, well, Mr. Ziegler, I hate to tell you this, but my wife's second cousin's got a neighbor whose boyfriend's son, his dad, has a brother who is selling life insurance, and if we buy anything, we'll have to buy from them. Well, I knew it was just a stall. They weren't going to buy any life insurance from anybody. And so what I did then was simply this. I remembered a book I'd read by Frank Bettcher many years ago called How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling. This is the reason salespeople need to be students. They need to be learning all the time. It is a profession, and it's a profession that changes. And Frank Bettcher had a statement in his book, I would tell you this if you were my own brother. He also had another statement in there simply, this is what I would do if I were you. Now what Frank Bettcher had done, he would make appointments before he ever made the call. For that prospect, he would say to the prospect, I can do something for you right now that no other insurance person in Philadelphia can do. And they would say, what's that? Well, I've made an appointment already for you to be examined tomorrow afternoon, promptly at 3 o'clock, by the only physician in Philadelphia who can give you agreement and approval right now that this amount of insurance is going to be placed in force. I stole a page from him, and I would say to the prospect, I can do something for you right now that no other insurance person in the world can do. Obviously, they'd say, what's that? I would say, I can marry you. Well, the old boy would say, you'd what? And I would reach over and I'd pick up a certificate of marriage, which I had already prepared. And the certificate of marriage would simply say, on this 28th day of August, 1993 or 2 or whenever, I, Zig Ziglar, agreed to marry John and Mary Smith. By this marriage, I agree to be available in time of need. I agree to stay abreast of all the tax developments and Social Security changes as they relate to the needs of John and Mary Smith. I agree to assume responsibility for giving them the best advice that my professional knowledge will permit. And I would simply say, the only thing that you agree to is this, to give Zig Ziglar the privilege of earning the right to serve. You put your okay here, we're in business. It was hilarious what generally happened. The old boy invariably would slap his leg and he'd say, honey, what about that? This dude wants to marry us. He wants to marry both of us. Mr. Ziegler, now this is legal. They're not going to get us for bigamy, are they? I'd go right along with it. I'd say, no, I've already cleared it with the insurance commissioner, the governor of the state. I've even talked about it with my brother-in-law. He says it's okay. And invariably, with a big laugh and a huge flourish, he would sign the marriage certificate. I'd beautifully typed his name in. It was on Corinthian script. It was beautiful parchment paper. Interestingly enough, I never once had a marriage certificate signed that I did not get the application signed. Now, how can you take that and use it in your life? Well, Hockfield and Associates is a firm up in Chicago, in the Chicago area. And Westminster, that Hockfield and Associates, is the gentleman who made this particular sale. He called on these people, and he was not getting any results at all. They sell private labels of various products to company, and here were the terms of agreement. When you buy a private label program from Hockfield and Associates and the Nice Pack Company, you also buy me. I am literally going to be married to the Shopco account. I will see that you receive the following: the finest products available for Shopco's valued customers, the best possible service, the fairest price, and he went right on down the list. And when we got to the bottom of it, he would simply say, and this is all you need to do to put this in force. First year, they sold over $500,000 worth of merchandise. They had been calling on them for years. I've had any number of clients to say, this works. See, the marriage indicates that you're not going to hit and run, that you're going to be a permanent person with them. It ties it together. The marriage close has worked and works well. There's no such thing as a little sale. But it is safe to say that we will miss 100% of all of the sales we don't ask for. Very few prospects are going to demand that we take their order. That does happen occasionally, but it is very rarely. Chris Hegarty says that 63% of all sales interviews end without a direct ask for the order. At this point, I would like to share with you what I believe is a very significant close. It's called the pressure belief close. At this point, what I want to simply say to you is that we've had some ideas, some procedures, and some stimulation. But when I talk about a pressure belief close, it happened in Australia. I was with my friend John Nevin. He was with World Book Encyclopedia. He told me of what happened to him when his career first got started as a World Book salesperson, and he went on to become the managing director. Called on a little German couple. They really were more like grandparents. They'd been in Australia a very brief time. Their English was not real good. The little lady was 51 years old. She had given birth to their one and only child when she was nearly 45 years old. A very little short lady. Had language difficulty. He called on them at roughly 9 o'clock in the evening. It was way past midnight when he left with the order. As he started to leave, she put her hand up on his shoulder. She had walked him through the front yard because they had a vicious dog, got him outside the gate. She reached up and put her hand on his shoulder. And I can't emulate that guttural German accent, but in essence it went like this: thank you. Thank you, young man, for stay with us till we know what these books do for our boy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Pressure belief is simply this. It's when you believe so fervently and so completely that that prospect is going to benefit the most by buying from you, that you are willing to kind of put your ego on the line. You're willing to take a slight risk even on occasion of offending someone by asking for the order again. Now let me stress something. You got to do it pleasantly. You got to do it politely. You got to do it professionally. You must by all means do it with that person's interest at heart. But if you really believe they're the winner, you will become so professional in what you do. You will learn so many closes that you will be able, basically, to go forward with the conviction that you are rendering them a service. Now, only experience, judgment, and common sense will dictate to you what is the proper time and what is the proper amount. You'll never get experience by listening to a trainer or watching one of the videos, which I do. You will get ideas. You will get techniques. You will get procedures. Now, if you really want to build a sales career and substantially improve your sales, it's time to go to work. I encourage you not only to read, but to study Secrets of Closing the Sale, and my other book, Ziegler on Selling. Now, the reason I say that is this. You can learn a lot of closes and procedures and techniques, but unless you understand the philosophy and the psychology behind them, you will only be partially as effective. You will need to read the exact words many times. There are literally over 140 closes and over 800 questions in these two books that will help you to lead people to those decision tables. And then in order to get the voice inflections down, we have made audio cassettes of each of these videos, and while you're in your car, you need to be listening to them over and over and over. The SMEI International, Sales and Marketing Executives International, says the average professional salesperson spends 510 hours a year in the automobile. That means you literally can make it your sales university. You can learn procedures and techniques. You will really be able to make it a part of you so you can automatically and instinctively respond. You also are going to need to work very much with your manager, your associate, or your trainer. If you're one of these people who happens only to be working independently by yourself, I encourage you to get in front of the video, look it over, take those notes, and then start compiling your own ideas to go along with the specifics that we are presenting here. The reason I want you doing all of these things, when you see something, you'll remember it. When you hear it, you forget it. But if you see it and hear it and do it, you'll understand it. That means you will close more sales. So if you do that, I can close as I always close by saying, you do these things and I'll see you. And yes, I really do mean you at the top. Thank you, and God bless you.